things. My job is to be able to provide you amazing information from these well-qualified speakers we have here. And thank you so much for being up early and spending time with us this morning here at the CBD Expo, our first official day of the Expo here. So thank you for coming. I know you're all here for different reasons, and we really want to be able to support your efforts in learning so much more about our industry here. What I'd like to do is first start off by introducing you to our panelists here. I will go ahead and start ladies first with Rena Goldberg. And please, can you tell us about yourself and what you have created within the CBD industry?
Yes, thank you so much. Is this, we good with the mic? A little closer? All right, good? Thank you, thank you. Welcome. So thank you again. Yes, I'm Rena Greenberg, and I'm really happy to be here today. And just a little backstory is what happened for me was at the age of 26, I actually had a heart attack. And I was literally, the doctor told me I had the heart of an 8-year-old. And I was in the hospital for 3 weeks in the cardiac care unit. And when I came out, I was just determined to find health. So I studied everything I could about health. I studied nutrition, herbs, everything, mind-body connection. And when I was fortunate enough to get healthy, I wanted to help others. And so I created a wellness program that was then reviewed and sponsored in over 75 hospitals. Over 100 major corporations had me on site to help their employees, like Disney and Home Depot. And it was wonderful. And I was really helping people mostly with addiction. So helping people to lose weight, to stop smoking, and with overall wellness. And when I looked at these people, I saw really 4 major kind of underlying areas where they were suffering. Pain, physical, emotional pain, sleep, lack of sleep, issues with anxiety, and then blood sugar issues with cravings. And so I wanted to help people in these areas. So when I discovered CBD, of course, years later, I was so excited, wanted to share it with everybody. And when I looked out at the marketplace, I was so disgruntled to see all the kind of misinformation and even sometimes outright marketing deception. And so I almost, after researching and finding all this, felt sort of forced to start my own brand of medical grade, high potency CBD. And that's what I went on to do. And it's been really a blessing. I recently, actually even as recently as this week, there have been stories out on all the syndicated news stories on Fox, NBC, ABC, CBS, really acknowledging the brand is trustworthy. Particularly, I have 1,000 milligram CBD pain relief cream. So that's a wonderful formulation because so many of the pain creams out there really have a lot less CBD in it. And then my main formulation is the CBD Super Cider, where I formulated using phytocannabinoid herbs with the CBD to help the efficacy, particularly in those areas with stress and with weight loss and those areas. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Great formulations you've created. And we have just thinking of your father. Yeah. Aubrey Arias here with us, and he's actually here from Florida. So Aubrey, please share with us about what you do.
Thank you, Keiko. And I'm right here in Orlando, so I'm local, which is nice to see events coming to Florida now of this quality. I was a network engineer, originally Air Force background, started in the Air Force in '92, stationed at the Pentagon, got out, became a contractor, deployed systems throughout the globe, and then went to the managed services side with like Sprint and AT&T, where we manage other companies' networks. So I've managed every Starbucks in the world, every Starwood, Eagle Global Logistics, which is a $7 billion annual global logistics company. So I came from an enterprise level background. My father, who she just mentioned, happens to be Bruce Perloin, who was known as the King of Pot. So he actually created the first public company in the industry called Medical Marijuana Inc. a little over a decade now ago. If you see a guy running around with a ponytail, that's going to be him. I dragged him along today. And I started consulting with him back when he first started the company. The industry's transformed. You wouldn't even recognize it. It's transformed dramatically. Even over the last 4 years, it's transformed. In fact, the CBD industry itself has. Then he went on after 2 years. He really couldn't touch the medical side because of his background with cannabis. He was in prison from the time I was 9 to 18. So he is under a kingpin law. So if he ever touched the marijuana side of the house again, he was going to go back away forever. So he was always trying ancillary type of businesses, what we call in the industry, which wasn't touching the plant. So instead of going that route, he decided to create Hemp Inc. about 2 years later. So what's interesting about the medical marijuana side of the house is the person that took over that company, and we were just talking about this in the green room, he imported one of the first CBD isolates about 8 years ago. A kilo of CBD isolate was about 100 grand, and he imported it from China. Today, you can get a kilo of isolate about $2,000 right now. The market's changed that much. So now we're envisioning a cannabinoid formulation world where the ingredients lists, if you will, are going to be coming down dramatically in price. CBD isolate, the industry is commoditizing right now. So where I focus my efforts and energies over the last 10 years has been mostly on strategy and working with my father and his network and people that I met in the industry. I became an investor through ArcView Group in 2013 and starting, again, investing in ancillary companies myself, mostly technical companies, which is my background, so I kind of stay in my wheelhouse. But through those companies, I started working with brands and industry leaders that we're all seeing the troubles and challenges that the industry has. You guys are coming in at a good time. I don't know how many of you have been in for a while, but if you're coming in now, this is a fantastic time, obviously with the 2018 hemp bill, farm bill passing with the hemp legalizations. We're still waiting on USDA and FDA to come through with their final says on what we can and can't do. So we're going to get clarity. So right now we're still working in a lot of gray areas. So obviously, from a strategic standpoint, if you're doing formulations, you want to make sure you're looking at best practices of what the FDA is already talking about and the USDA. I don't know if you guys are on the farm side much, but you're going to see what those regulatory agencies are looking at, and you want to stay ahead of that curve. We don't know, for instance, if they're going to come out with a pharmaceutical requirement where you can't be OTC if it's a certain milligrams of CBD inside that product. We got GW Pharma that lobbies heavily for the pharmaceutical side of the house because they do whole plant extract. They're not synthetic. A lot of people are moving to the synthetic world. So it's these types of things that, where if you have questions about those, that's my background on the strategic side of the house and where the industry is now and where it's going.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. Out of curiosity, how many here, raise your hands, have actually a brand that you've formulated at this time? Wonderful. How many of here are interested in formulating your own brands? Okay, great. Well, both of our panelists here, as you see, have a wonderful background to be able to support the information for you. So, Rena, for you, in first starting out in creating your brands, how did you first begin on bringing all those parts together to create it then?
Yeah, thanks, Keiko. Great question. So it really requires a lot of research and really sifting through the masses of information that's out there. And I'd say if you want to formulate your own brand, beyond maybe creating it in your own kitchen, the first step is really finding a really good contract manufacturer who you can really trust, who is going to take your recipe and actually be able to mass produce it. Because what I found when I was shopping for manufacturers is a lot of them, of course, want to cut corners and cut expenses. And for example, when I first created my herbal formulas, the CBD Super Cider, which is a liquid herbal formula in a base of organic apple cider vinegar and sherry concentrate, I wanted to keep it absolutely clean and pure, and I ultimately did get it USDA organic certified. But some of the contract manufacturers that I would just go to visit, had some ideas like, okay, let's not brew the herbs, let's just throw in a bunch of powders, or let's just take a box of organic chai. He's like, I can get it so cheap, and he throws a box of organic chai at me. I'm like, and I mean, it was organic, but there was cane sugar and all kinds of things that I really wasn't comfortable with. Again, I work with the population of people who are trying to lose weight, who may be diabetic, and the whole goal of the product is to help them balance and normalize and not crave the sweets and the junk. So it took a lot of research to find someone I could really trust who was on the same page as me and wanted to bring out really this high quality and do the extra work, like actually brew the herbs like a fresh cup of tea before it's put in bottles.
About how long did that take you to create your first formula?
Oh, I'd say over a year to put all the pieces together. I actually sourced, which is probably unusual. I mean, maybe some people would just give their recipe to their manufacturer and let them source, but I was such a stickler for the sources of everything. I know where all the herbs are grown. I know where the CBD, it only comes from one farm. So I get, emails all the time, you get your CBD cheaper and cheaper, but I know this farm. I know it's genetically proprietary material. I know it's consistent, batch to batch. It might be a little bit more costly, but I'm very comfortable with it. So I think that's a really important piece is really sourcing your ingredients yourself and knowing that your contract manufacturer is going to honor that and use those sources.
And I think right now, because the CBD market is still unregulated, we do want to be able to see people make brands and formulas that are actually integrated into good medicine. Because overall, I know we're all here because we want people to feel better and be able to heal themselves. And you can only do that with a good product. And Aubrey, with that being said, for what you're doing now in their place in the market, I know some people, he had mentioned ArcView. Do you know who ArcView is? They are a company that was started, investment company, first started by Steve D'Angelo of Harborside, as well as Troy Dayton. And it is, I want to say, a group investment organization that has helped so much of the industry develop. So what benefits did you find in creating your space now, Aubrey, that you find are really helping people first starting out in the industry?
It's really just learning from the roots of the industry where the challenges lie in navigating an unregulated industry that's going through regulation. So it's step one, and you mentioned Steve D'Angelo. Harborside was so successful in California because Steve always met and exceeded any type of industry standards. So from the caretaking of his patients to the quality of products that went into the store, he always met and exceeded those standards. So that's right now where we're at in the industry. You can kind of get a view of where the regulatory environments are going. The FDA, what they do is they actually ask the leaders in the industry, how do we regulate you? Give us your input. What do we need to look for? What are the bad actors doing? What are the good actors doing? What are the best practices? They don't know, so they have to go and get the feedback from the industry leaders. So being an industry leader, just having good practices, sourcing, that's amazing. I love that. This is a great strategy to put forth, is knowing every ingredient that goes in your product. Because what's going to happen is the people that don't, you're going to be put out of business overnight once the FDA comes through with the regulations. So if you're not GMP compliant, ISO certified, knowing where your seed to sale is what we call on the marijuana side or cannabis side of the house, where the farm that your product came from, all the way to the processor. If it wasn't tracked and traced, and you have all the kind of what they call certificates of analysis, the testing parameters for your product, you're probably going to go out of business pretty quick because the FDA is going to come down to regulate, and they're going to fine you or just put you out of business, close you down, make you do recalls, et cetera. So knowing your supply chain is imperative. Your formulations, being realistic on knowing what the efficacious percentages of CBD or a lot of people are going with full spectrum. And how many of you are familiar with full spectrum terminology versus broad spectrum? How many know the difference between full spectrum and broad spectrum? All right, so the ones that don't know, full spectrum is basically whole plant extract with THC in it, and then broad spectrum, they distill out the THC effectively, right? They remediate the THC out of it, so it's zero. And it's really important because even though hemp is legal with 0.3% THC, as they extract it, everything gets concentrated, including all the bad things like heavy metal, pesticides, herbicides. That's why the testing is so important. So if you're doing full spectrum or broad spectrum, you've got to look at the certificates of analysis. I mean, you need full panels, right? So going back to your question, knowing what is industry standard and exceeding those standards is where my strengths kind of have lied. And being in industry for over time, you will start learning that coming to these types of conferences as much as you can and educating yourself as much as you can will make your brand and product a superior product and be able to weather the storm. As I say, the cream rises to the top, so rise to the top.
And of course, being a responsible manufacturer of a good product and that R&D that you put into it it does, make it important, because in the end, you're going to be creating a product that people really will benefit from. And so, Rena, with your products here, how did you go about getting feedback? Did you do any sort of private clinical trial and see how maybe patients were benefiting from it and alter and change it through the process?
Yes, thank you. I actually did. So before I even put my products out to market, I would find a test group who was willing to sample it, and then I would, we did written surveys and got the feedback, and it was really helpful in getting the final product together. So I've been fortunate because so many people I had worked with over the years had really been asking me all along for products, supplements, things that I could recommend, and mine has for the last 30 years been mostly a mind-body approach. So when I was able to create these products, it was wonderful because my following was literally, hungry, waiting for a product because I hadn't endorsed anything else over the years. So it was wonderful, to get people to try it, and then the feedback, of course, is so rewarding. And so because I'm using these really high quality ingredients and really going the extra mile with the higher percentages of actual full spectrum CBD in the products, people feel the difference. And many, many people had said, even with the pet product, they're saying, wow, I had tried other things. I really noticed the difference. And that, of course, makes it all worth it. So, yeah.
And Aubrey, with being able to create good products, how would you suggest for people be able to find the sources, the good sources that are making quality and growing quality in products? How do they source that?
Absolutely. So there's groups and associations now in the industry, National Hemp Association, National Cannabis Industry Associations, that have kind of created an ecosystem of the cells, of some vetting practices. You can look at what's there, but my favorite company right now, or organization, I don't want to use the term favorite, but the one that seems to be doing best practices is called the U.S. Hemp Association, or U.S. Hemp Roundtable, U.S. Hemp Roundtable. And they're actually, and one of the reasons why they think it's a pay-to-play, or a lot of people will say that, have some derogatory statements, but the members of their board are the largest CBD manufacturers in the industry right now. So there's pros and cons to any of these groups, but what their job is they're working right hip to hip with the FDA and USDA. So when you have an association like that, and they have different membership levels, I'm not a member, but that's the one I could recommend. They're not really political advocacy groups. They're more about they have their own internal certification program built by the people making the products. So, and the people that have really grown this industry together. And again, there's always pros and cons to any group, but that group is the one I could recommend to get kind of an early insight, look at what the industry's coming up with as far as their certifications are going. Certification's only worth, and this is coming from, I used to have a network background with Cisco, was the king of network certifications. So the certifications are only worth the company that backs those certifications, or the group or organization that backs those certifications. So you'll see a lot of companies that say, oh, this company's doing great. They have a checklist of what they are. But who is that company that's actually building that checklist? Do they even know what the troubles and challenges are with the industry? Like I saw one that came out with a checklist about, oh, this company doesn't have merchant processing. We can't have a lot of companies can't have merchant processing right now in our current industry. A lot of the merchant processing that some companies had were actually removed after we went through legalization. So, and we'll get those back after the FDA comes through with their regulations. So it's really finding those certification programs of a industry recognized group and trying to go hip to hip with those companies and not do it on your own, right? Don't try to figure it all out on your own, because everybody else is working together collaboratively. And my father had a great term for the industry. It's co-opetition, right? You're cooperating with each other, but even though you're competing at some levels, but the industry needs to thrive on cooperation, right? That's how we build a strong industry together, talk and have realistic conversations about what are the challenges you go through to source a good product, quality product. And through these organizations and going through events like this, you'll find the companies that come and you'll see they have PhDs on staff. And they're talking about how their product is sourced and made. And they're like, okay, those are the great groups that we need to partner with. And they've done it for years on end now. So you have more maturity industry. So the companies that have a few years under their umbrella, granted, there's some amazing companies coming up out of the woodwork. I just was at a farm in Arizona that's doing 10,000 acres for extraction, made up of, they've got PhDs, Harvard grads, everything else that's running the companies. They've raised over $90 million. So that's great for formulations, because the formulation side of the house, your products are going to get cheaper and cheaper every year for your ingredients list, and they're going to be done by smarter and smarter companies that know how to run industrial scale extraction systems and things like that. So,
Wonderful answer. And of course, I always suggest, if you look at products out there that you find, wow, this looks like a wonderful product, and you find that they have a lot of verification from people who've utilized it and they found great health success, those are brands to be respected. A network and really find out who they're working with, what sources they have, and then it will really give you a good sense of what's happening out there. And of course, being at an event like this, look at the plethora of people you have to be able to network with. So Rena, in your product and development here, I know that you actually added in certain natural herbs and everything. Did you have a background in herbology, or were you going to specialists who helped put those together for you in your formulations?
Yeah, thank you. Again, yes, I really did research the herbs, and we went looking for herbs to pair with the full spectrum CBD to increase the efficacy of CBD. There's so many herbs to choose from, but I really wanted to hone in on what's known as phytocannabinoids. So, of course, the body has the endocannabinoid system, the cannabinoids that are endogenous, made within the body, and then there are the herbs that can really help with the endocannabinoid system, and those are the phytocannabinoids. So CBD, of course, is the strongest phytocannabinoid, but there are others. And so in my research, I found the phytocannabinoids that were also big anti-inflammatory, antioxidants. So, for example, black pepper, turmeric, cinnamon, nutmeg, cacao, and echinacea is known most for helping people with colds, but it's also a really strong phytocannabinoid. And one that's lesser known is helichrysum, a very strong phytocannabinoid, but that also helps with mood and regulation and balance. So it was wonderful because these herbs then work synergistically. And I'm talking about a good amount. Sometimes you'll see products with a sprinkling of herb. So again, when you're looking at a product, you want to look at the serving size, how many herbs are in it. So each, in my, let's say, an 8-ounce bottle, I have 40 grams of these herbs, fresh brewed in a 5-step process, and then they're blended with the 400 milligrams full spectrum CBD. So they work really well together.
Out of curiosity, how many different SKUs do you have in your line?
Probably 12, and then there's some size difference. So if you add the sizes in, it would probably be like 17.
Oh, that's quite a few, yeah.
Yeah.
So Aubrey, with the industry and where it's at right now, we are, like you said, we're at a great point here to be able to expand brands. What do you feel are some key things that people at the beginning here should really be looking out for in starting from square root one? What's some of the first things that they should do besides finding a good source?
Right, so as I mentioned, best practices looking at what the FDA is probably going to do as far as regulatory environments go, because you don't want to create a formulation today and then FDA says tomorrow you got to follow these criterion, right? Like if you source from a non-GMP compliant facility, guarantee you FDA is going to come and say you need a GMP compliant facility. You need an ISO certification if you're doing this and this. So making sure you're on top of what's going on the regulatory side, because I think we're only 6 months away or so from getting that clarity. Secondarily is following best practices for supplements right now is a good practice as a baseline. We don't know if we're going to be considered supplements. We don't know if the FDA is going to be allowing for edibles. And we got to worry about federal and state level regulatory. So there's states that right now are banning edibles with CBD, not allowing CBD put into anything that can be eaten, right?
No more gummies.
No, right. So gummies could go away overnight. We don't know yet. I don't think they're going to do that, but they may have smaller, like for instance, THC levels in Colorado. They reduced. You couldn't have more than 10 milligrams after some episodes with some paranoia, anxiety activities that happen from people ingesting too much edibles. So we don't know on the CBD side. Phytocannabinoids can have interactions with drugs. So it's also very important that you guys know whatever you're formulating, you should go and be doing on drug.com or some other sites interactions with cannabinoids or cannabis and CBD. Because if you are finding out that you're creating a formulation for a specific demographic that might be taking a specific medicine, like say blood pressure medicine, right? And you find out that cannabinoids have an interaction with blood pressure medicine, well, maybe you shouldn't be creating that formulation, right? Because the FDA is going to nix it, or you're going to go out of business and get sued, right? Because you create a blood pressure formulation that actually decreased the efficacy of their current blood pressure medicine, and there was no transition. So a lot of good medical practitioners are helping, and they're very knowledgeable on that, and they will transition people, for instance, off of opiates this way, right? With cannabis, because the pain effectiveness of THC, and I even believe CBC, which is now one of the big, I just finally saw someone got a first kilo of CBC cannabinoids. So as we scale up on the industrial side, we're going to see all these minor cannabinoids becoming more readily available. Those minor cannabinoids like CBG, you're going to see this year is the big CBG year. CBD's got it's already in its heyday. CBG's next. CBC is probably going to be following suit. Where actually can get into the isolation side of the house. I'm a big proponent of full spectrum and broad spectrum. I believe in the entourage effect, as you'll hear a lot. But for formulations, consumers packaged goods industries don't work that way. They work in isolation. They do one compound because they find out exactly what that compound does, and they want consistency in their products that will provide the consumer the same effect every time, every year that they take that product. So consistency is key. So doing the formulations, unfortunately, a lot of times you may have to move to an isolation mechanism. You use the same farm every year, which is you can basically have a general idea, and you get your COA, so you know what's going into your formulations. So knowing exactly what parts per million are going into formulations is going to be huge because consumers demand consistency. So they take your product one day or 1 year, because we do harvests, and they get a different effect the next year, they may not carry your brand anymore or take your brand anymore. So that would be the keys.
You know, one thing you mentioned, and I know Rena's probably looked at this too, you said in a few months, could be 6 months from now, we will have more standardized regulations. So what can we share, both of you, the same question, what can you share right now in having you being prepared for the future, and what regulations will be coming through to everyone for us to follow those guidelines? Rena?
So one of the things that we're already seeing is that, people are becoming more and more savvy, consumers are, and they're understanding the importance of looking at the certificate of analysis like you're talking about, really the complete panel. And so, though it isn't law yet, it's a really good idea, and I'm already implementing having QR codes on every label. So it's one state already is requiring it, but probably down the line all the states will. So already just thinking ahead and having those QR codes available, having those COAs available on the website so people can really see all the ingredients in the product. And of course, being really careful, not making any claims, like you're talking about blood pressure, that would be a big red flag, is claiming that your product can lower blood pressure or even get rid of any kind of specific disease state. So more general, health with health and wellness is more acceptable. And then making sure, like the labels that you're doing now, even though it probably is going to change, and it is frustrating to have to redo labels, but I can't tell you how many times I've redone my labels, but always making sure they're up to date in terms of the compliance, at least right now for the dietary supplement category, because we don't know yet what the laws are going to be for CBD.
Absolutely.
And Aubrey?
So just jumping on what Rena just said, follow best practices for what FDA already has in place for supplements. You mentioned the labeling. I know there's a group in Oregon. Literally, they have a PhD he has a labeling company following all the FDA guidelines for supplements, best practice supplements. And they did their own vertically integrated CBD full spectrum design. But they had a PhD formulation doctor on their team. So following those best practices of what's already kind of gives you a good idea. It's already out there. They're not going to change too many things, hopefully, We're just hoping they don't get too strict and stringent on the higher end, I would say. 1,000 milligrams seems to be what may be capped. GW Pharma is going to really push back on a lot of these things. The information's out there. Again, going to and joining some of these associations and networking with these groups that are working close to the FDA and the USDA is key right now, because you don't want to get halfway through a formulation and find out that you're not going to be compliant and you have to go and rework everything from scratch. Formulation side's difficult enough, but the branding and everything else, you got to follow best practice of what's already been implemented by the regulatory environments and start that as your baseline, those best practices, and that will allow you an easy pivot if you have to make any changes for whatever regulatory environments come down from the FDA over the next 6 months or so.
Thank you. And besides the labeling, I also feel that packaging is very important too. You want to be able to have a package that is going to be safe for consumers to know that it is something that is protected from anybody infringing upon what's inside of it. And of course, if it could be sustainable as well. I always looked at that. Now that we are definitely at a point where we're moving forward with better products, hopefully, and great formulations, what do you think for the future some products are that we're going to see trending that the consumers, now that they're being so savvy, what products do you think are going to be something on the forefront? Have you thought about that?
Well, what I'm seeing right now, I mentioned earlier, is with a 1,000 milligram pain cream. There's so many people out there suffering with so many different types of pain, and so this syndicated TV news story that's been airing on my 1,000 milligram pain cream. I got so many calls, and most of them, not surprising, are for the elderly. The elderly population is really tuning in, and though about I'd say 50% are also willing to try the oral CBD. A lot of them no, I don't want to ingest it, but boy, are they ready to put that cream on because they're suffering, and there's no even pharmaceutical alternatives that are really helping them. So I would say that's probably, unfortunately, going to continue into the future because people are really suffering.
And here's a statistic for you. In 10 years, 2030, more of the country will be over the age of 65 than under. So that's something to really know. So if you're going to be 65, know that you've got the power. Aubrey, any future trends that you can see
Absolutely.
that need to be worked on?
Yeah, so I would follow what's going to be coming out on the isolation side of the house, and I definitely follow what Rena just said and Keiko just said. The elderly demographic is your number one consumer base because they're going to get so many benefits from the cannabis plant, tons in every aspect of it. So the formulations in elderly care and wellness is going to be tremendous, especially with dementia type diseases. They're already seeing studies that halts the plaque production, which they think is a lot of the aspects of dementia, and can even now they're saying some that are showing reversals of the plaque buildup. But my grandmother had dementia, so runs in our family. So I've already started taking CBD just as a preventative measure. And they say you should maybe start taking, some doctors say you start taking at 40. So I definitely think that's a big category. But focusing on the isolate side, again, full spectrum proponent, but on the isolate side, looking at what isolates are coming through, CBD is obviously, CBG is going to be the next one. CBC, CBN are the next two larger ones that are being produced by the farmers. So the ones that will be more affordable. And looking at what studies, because as the farmers produce more minor cannabinoids as their focal points, because I'll go into that a little bit because I see some questioning eyes. So right now, the marijuana industry focused on THC, right? So they bred plants for high THC yields, and they mostly were smokables. But when Colorado went legal, we became more of an extraction industry. And now we're getting into the concentrates and the formulations. You can't formulate flower really very easily. And so unless you're doing herbal blends, right? But now that we're kind of in the extraction world and formulation world, where the farmers are now growing for CBD. So now, the next one that they went to was CBG. They have strains that are cultivars, or I like chemotypes, of plants that have high CBD yields. So those are going to be more readily extractable outside those plants. So now they're getting the minor cannabinoids are figuring out how to do CBN now very well. And then, as I mentioned before, CBC is the next one. But so looking at what those cannabinoids do and talking to the research and doctorates and universities that are doing the research on those minor cannabinoids and finding that out, again, you stay ahead of the curve on what those cannabinoids can do. THCV is a very interesting one. Can't do it in non-legal states, but that's appetite suppressant. And I saw a farm that was growing a THC variant because they knew it was an appetite suppressant. This was 4 years ago. It was the weirdest looking cannabis plant I'd ever seen. They called it the alien. It was a deep green, little stunty plant, but they said they had people interested in the THC.
Yes, please
appetite
promote
suppressant.
that, please.
Yes. So, but again, they can't do that, but we're going towards federal. So the other aspect is look at federal legalization and plan for what a normalized industry looks like. Looks like every other industry. Massive scale. You're going to be able to get your ingredients cheaper. The consumer is going to demand the highest quality. The consumer speaks with their dollars. So if you're not a brand with a good reputation behind it, you're not going to, with this many people competing in the industry, you will not survive. So if you're not on top of your game and doing things the right way, the ethical way, you're going to be gone. And I'm glad.
But we all want you to survive. We all want to see you successful and making great formulas with wonderful brands behind you. We're getting close to the end now, and I know we're going to have a Q&A, but I just want to be able to have you share with everyone a wonderful takeaway regarding this panel here. So if you could just share with us your final words here that you'd like to share with everyone.
Oh, sure, certainly. So I want to thank everybody for coming here. You guys are the leaders in the industry now. These events are still not as prevalent around the country as a lot of other industries. CBD is probably the number one trending thing in the industry, but always look forward. And you guys coming here to these events will keep you abreast and ahead of the other industry competitors. So thank you for coming, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on the side too.
And Rena.
Yeah, well, again, I want to echo that, Aubrey. Thank you so much, Keiko and Aubrey, for
Thank you, Keiko.
sharing the panel with me, and thank you all for coming. And of course, yeah, if you have any questions, I have a booth. I'm not sure the booths are numbered but I'm officially 912, but I'm in the back of the room. It's Rena's Organic. So please stop by, and I'm just be happy to talk to you. And I wish you all the best of success, because we're the people really wanting to help ourselves and each other to get as healthy as possible without necessarily doing, harmful medical procedures, or, really staying as healthy as possible in a positive way using these wonderful plant compounds that are really miraculous and can help us in so many areas.
Definitely. We're here because we want to make sure that maybe next year you've created an amazing brand, or the brand that you have now is so successful that you'll be on the panel as well. I do want to give a plug that today at 3:30, I actually do the senior workshop, CBD for You and Me. So if any of you are looking toward the future and being a part more of the senior support of CBD products, you can come to that workshop. But I'd like to also right now open it up for you to be able to ask our amazing panelists any of the questions and thoughts you've had come up. So don't be shy, raise your hand, because we've all made a little family here together. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Arena, I believe. You guys are doing some value-added ingredients, it seems like, for some of the CBD. Are you delivery systems capsules and tablets, or are you actually delivering in?
I'm actually not using capsules and tablets. So the CBD Super Cider is a liquid herbal concentrate, because it's an invasive organic apple cider vinegar, and the only sweetener in it is fresh cherries picked from the farm in Washington State. And so I'm really keeping it as a liquid, because I found that with the apple cider vinegar, it really helps that bioavailability and all that, really helping the gut. Now, I know, of course, you can source apple cider vinegar, as a tablet or a powder, but I just really like what I'm seeing with the liquid. So even though it's a little more cumbersome, to ship bottles and all that, we're doing that. So that's, and then I also have powder for the CBD superfood, but I am not doing capsules and tablets. Thank you.
You're adding powders into the CBD, which is probably depends on something like MCT, or is it?
Oh, yeah, sorry if I wasn't clear. So my line has tinctures. So the tinctures are just pure full spectrum CBD in MCT oil. And then the separate product is CBD Super Cider, which is the one I was speaking of, in the organic apple cider vinegar and the cherry concentrate, and that's just a pure liquid. And then I only have one powder, it's a CBD superfood, and that's my only product that's a water soluble, and it's it's blended with 23 other superfoods, like noni. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going there because some of my clients are coming to me and they are asking for some value-added ingredients to be put in.
Yeah.
The tinctures, some of those value-added ingredients that they want to put in are not lipophilic, so how do you,
Right, yeah.
whenever there was activity to like say if you were doing a B vitamin to what side of the product,
Right.
how am I going to get that to stay in my oil once I create that CBD in the MCT? Like,
Yeah.
I do whole oil or
Right, no, that's true. Yeah, because I actually am not adding any of those powders into the oil, so it's two separate products. It's a powder product, and then I have an oil. Yeah, because you are going to run into a mixing problem. But really, the solution for that is finding a good source of water-soluble CBD.
Right, which is basically encapsulations, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, sir.
You have to be careful about things that would react with CBD, things that would react with CBD, and maybe related, so you worry about shelf life or other preservation.
Yes, my products are tested for shelf life. So my CBD Super Cider, which is the blend that has the other ingredients, which might lend itself to wanting to, of course, know. So my shelf life's been actually over a year, but I claim a year, but it's actually been shelf life tested to 18 months.